With Doctor Who's fate currently unknown, and it being shopped around potential streaming services at the moment, there is the prevailing narrative that Doctor Who is the way it is because it just went too woke. It went too woke, it went broke, all of that fun cope talk. There was this clip that went semi-viral online after the broadcast of the reality war. This is a tweet from Star Whovian, who, just to preface, Star Whovian is a reactionary who had a very public meltdown when he saw a picture of a bunch of women at a Doctor Who convention. And that's basically how Star Whovian is known within the fandom, having a full-blown psychotic break because women are into Doctor Who. And he shared this clip from BBC Radio talking about the fate of Doctor Who after the reality war. Let's listen.
In terms of like how many people are watching and what Doctor Who represents now, I've had a really interesting text. This is from Andy, who says, I'm a guy who considers himself of the left. Most of my friends are women, some are trans, some are gay. But even I cringe watching an episode of Doctor Who. It's no longer a family show about space and time travel. It's literally a bunch of memes telling us that white straight men are the source of all evil in the universe. It's aimed at 12-year-old girls, but watched by a declining number of people over the age of 40. If Doctor Who is dying, it's because the BBC has killed it. Yes, there were always stories that had messages or storylines about the environment or the misuse of power or intolerance, but now it has just become an intolerant programme condemning most of its viewers simply for existing.
One second, I'm just going to interrupt with this. We need to call this what this is, folks. This is mental illness. Like, genuinely. And I'm sorry, cancel me for using the term. You can have your opinions on the show. You can like or dislike the current regime or whatever. But this isn't even, like, remotely indicative of what the show is currently doing. This is, like, genuine mental illness and just hallucination. And the guy who wrote this email in, who claims to be of the left because he has female friends, which, you know, a very high bar. We're lovely to have you, comrade. How he perceives the show. It's like, yes, sometimes the show will do some lecturing, but it feels like I can count those examples on like one hand of the current era, of the current regime, of when it does get lecturing. There's the giggle when the 14th Doctor is talking about people going mad with TV or whatever. What else is there? There's also the 15th Doctor yelling about Palestinians or something. I don't know. Like, I don't understand where this has come from of the Doctor apparently being a lecturing force, other than it just being some sort of weird racial or sexist bias when you also have Jodie Whittaker involved here as well. There is also the Star Beast, the whole male presenting Time Lord thing, which I don't think anybody liked. It was all like, hello fellow kids, but if you can only really point to one or two lines across like 20 episodes of TV broadcast over 2.5 years, you are massively reaching here. And when it comes to the actual politics of the show, the politics of the current era, whether or not it's woke or not or whatever, honestly, I need some substantiation here. And I've had a lot of subscriber growth recently, humble brag on the channel, but that has also included some people who aren't a fan of the current regime, which is absolutely fine on principle. But when I ask them, like, what about the politics, what about the wokeness or whatever, do you not like about the current era of the show? They kind of falter. They just sort of go straight for the identity politics. It's just, there was a black man in it. It's got a disabled character. There's someone in a wheelchair. And that's kind of the beginning and the end of it. When it comes to the show being political or progressive or left-leaning or wearing its politics on its sleeve, for example, you have the Sunmakers in the 70s, Robert Holmes, one of the best writers in Doctor Who history, writing an episode because it was mad about how big his tax bill was, writing The Caves of Androzani as a Vietnam parallel. You've got one writer from Doctor Who from the 70s who was literally on a MI5 list. You had card-carrying socialists writing Doctor Who. Curse of the Daleks, the first Doctor Who stage play, written by David Whittaker, was a story about the failure of neoliberal politics and about how fascism is something that has to be actively combated. Doctor Who has often worn its politics on its sleeve. A lot of it has to do with essentially media and cultural brain rot over the past 10 years, as a result of Gamergate and also as a result of right-wing populism with Donald Trump and everything, where it's just a case of where identity politics is the first and foremost of Doctor Who's apparent wokeness. where you have an era, including the Jodie Whittaker era, when they lick the boot of Amazon in the ending of Kablam, saying that the systems aren't the problem, how people use the systems and exploit them, that's the problem, which is a really, like, centre-right neoliberal message. The ending of the Interstellar Song Contest, which effectively tells the story of how the genocide survivor should know his place, and then the Doctor actively tortures them. Some really weird regressive messaging. There's maybe one actual lecturing of a white guy in the story, and that's Lucky Day, but Conrad is not being lectured to because he's white, he's being lectured to because he lied and misled and manipulated the Doctor's best friend Ruby. If you look at that scene and you see nothing but a racial dynamic in it, I think that's a you problem, anonymous person who texted into the BBC. Let's continue.
It's interesting because when I watched this 20 minutes, it was just kind of randomly on, I was pottering around, it was on. I didn't feel as strongly as Andy feels, but I did notice like the diversity of the characters, and I was just like, okay, so this one's this person, this one's this person, this one's this person.
Yeah.
Fine, but I can see why Andy is saying what he's saying.
Sometimes it does feel like you're being lectured to. I think it really depends, depending on...
Like, Jesus Christ. They'll just let anybody on the BBC nowadays, won't they? But the idea that the existence of a diverse group of people, and presumably they're talking about a scene-setting unit or whatever, where you've got a staff that predominantly consists of older women, you know, with Kate and Mel, and you've also got Ibrahim, you've got Shirley, maybe Morris, I don't know whatever episode they were watching, and you also got Rose. The fact that we live in a diverse world, the fact that we live in a world that contains multitudes and different types of people, and you think that the existence of those people is being lectured to? Like, Jesus Christ, what type of thought process is that? It reminds me of that Reiki Iola interview from BBC Breakfast when she was promoting The Pact. Reiki Iola, you may remember, she played the hostess in Midnight, and she went on to lead The Pact, the BBC prestige drama written by Pete McTeague. And she was confronted, in quotes, by saying that this is just a woke Welsh family. And she was like, don't hand me that word if you're not going to explain what you mean, because this is just a black family in Wales. And woke basically became a floating signifier in that moment for black people shouldn't be on TV. And the BBC asked her that on live breakfast television, which was absolutely shitty, unhinged behaviour. I think it's absolutely maddening. Okay, this person's in a wheelchair and they're in the show, so therefore it's lecturing. People with disabilities exist, my dude. It's not lecturing if that the world contains multitudes. I think the fact that Doctor Who is maybe wearing its diversity a little bit more on its sleeve now, it's an optics thing. It's identity politics. Because forget about the actual political ideology of the writers in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. In the late 1980s, Andrew Cartmel, the script editor, wanted to bring down the government with his Doctor Who stories, but that's not seen as woke, or maybe it would be if it was broadcast now. It's just identity politics all the way down. They don't actually engage with the politics of the stories themselves. They don't actually engage with the politics of the writing. They don't engage with the politics of the characters. It's identity politics all the way down. It's just, you see a black actor as the Doctor, and you think that's woke as a default. You see a disabled character on screen, and you see that woke as a default. And woke equals bad in this context. So therefore, by your own thought process, black equals bad, disabled equals bad, shouldn't be in media, segregate it. That's your thought process for it. And the fact that the BBC, obviously maybe playing devil's advocate here, is trying to legitimize that, fuck that.
I mean, who you are and kind of how much involved and how invested you are in this episode.
How does Doctor Who, like, the people over 40 still watching it and still wanting to relate to it in the same way? Like, you can't.
Or enjoy it. Just enjoy it and have that nostalgia. Maybe that's what Andy is saying. He feels alienated from...
I mean, that's not what he's saying. You read out the text or the email or whatever the correspondence was. That's not what he said. Okay.
Even having that experience.
Yeah. But in the bits I have seen, I do kind of agree with him, because sometimes it does feel like you are being lectured to. I think in the few times we've had to watch it for must watch, because I never watch it by choice.
I'm not expecting a full-blown explanation. I'm not expecting a full-blown breakdown or whatever of what they've watched or what their opinions on it were, but it would be lovely if you could substantiate any of this. It would be lovely if you could point to a specific scene or a specific moment of this so-called lecturing. I also need to stress as well, because I mentioned this with the ending of Orphan 55, when that came out in 2021, The fact that the story ends with the Doctor saying, kids, recycle, you gotta change or you become dregs or whatever, it's not a good ending, not a good story. But we need to sort of, as a culture, detach the idea of subtle equaling good and not subtle equaling bad. We need to detach these. Like, these are not things that necessarily coexist with each other. If that was the case, The Twilight Zone would be considered some of the worst wokest TV in history because it literally ends with the narrator lecturing to the audience what the moral of the story was. But The Twilight Zone is considered some of the best sci-fi, some of the best TV entertainment of the 20th century. So it's clearly not a lecturing thing. It's context dependent, of course, and it's execution dependent, but subtle does not necessarily equal good. Sometimes you can obfuscate your message so much that you're not communicating anything because it's so buried in metaphors or buried in subtlety. It's execution dependent, but it's why whenever somebody in my comment section says it's so preachy, it's so woke, if you actually ask for a follow-up question or ask for any sort of substantiation, and I've been in this game for a long time, chat, I know what I'm doing, okay? When I ask basic follow-up questions, it always results in faltering or backtracking. 100% success rate on my part. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm built different, but that's just sort of my win-loss ratio.
I've come in and said exactly the same thing as Andy. So he's not imagining it. He's not alone. And,
I mean, he kind of is imagining it. I don't think he is alone because, Star Whovian, Nerderotic, John Delaroz, who sees black person and thinks that's woke. They're not alone, but this is essentially some sort of collective schizophrenia, where it is some sort of weird mental illness that is a prerequisite for their political positions.
I have always wondered, how do you keep making a show if it is just lecturing at people and you're not just...
But it's like, I need some substantiation here. I need some examples, please. And I know that you are not the official BBC Doctor Who correspondent, but I need something to work with here, apart from devil's advocacy or some sort of dedication to impartiality. I need evidence here, please.
Just getting the time travel, space nonsense.
The best episode of the past season took place on a giant kaiju robot crab. Come on, folks. You gotta work with me here. Anyway, and it feels like this is an interesting companion piece to this Dead Ringers clip, which went, once again, semi-viral on social media, because Dead Ringers is doing a current tour at the moment. John Culshaw and many others are reuniting for Dead Ringers, and they did this Doctor Who clip, this Doctor Who parody, which, let's listen to John Culshaw do his best Ncuti Gatwa impression.
Before all that, now on BBC One, it's time for the last in the series of Doctor Who. Yes, it's still going. I was surprised too.
Okay, solid opener. All good so far.
Hey, Commander Stewart, what's going down, babes?
Doctor, thank God you're here. There's a CGI monster from another dimension destroying the whole of London. Again.
Plenty of time for that. Give me a hug.
Hug?
Sure, I've got to hug everybody in this room because that's the kind of woke, touchy-feely doctor I am now. Can't leave any minority behind. Okay, wheelchair-bound lady, give me a hug. Ethnic man, here comes a hug. Trans person, it's hugging time. Gay robot, you is in for one heck of a hug. Show me the lovin'.
Oh dear. So, firstly, I don't know why John Culshaw, voicing a Rwandan actor, has decided to give Ncuti Gatwa a lisp other than just gay stereotyping. He's obviously watched the show. Like, this isn't like the previous caller in the previous video who I think just sort of imagined a different show and then decided to complain about that. He's being specific enough that he probably is watching the show. But the idea that hugging people is woke, and it feels incredibly like, how you doing, fellow kids? I don't know. It feels simultaneously informed enough to know what it's on about, but detached enough to not know anything about the world at all. I don't get it. And I'm not here to say you can't make fun of Doctor Who. It's the very serious show. My Blue Box show is to be taken very seriously. I saw Dead Ringers live in 2005, 2006. They went to Hull, and I was in the audience, and they did some very fun Doctor Who stuff there. This is so off base.
I have you now, Doctor!
I warned you. The CGI monster's broken in.
And here's what you have to do to beat it, Kate, babes. Simply tell me that I'm wonderful and how I'm the most amazing person in the universe.
Doctor, do you think lazily written mawkishness is really going to scare me?
Let's see, monster babes. Kate?
You lift everyone up by your example, Doctor.
No, stop! I can't take the hallmark card straightness of your empty platitudes.
It's working. The power of unearned sentimentality in the script is poison to it. More!
Right. You may not have a family, Doctor, but we humans are all your children.
Oh, no!
Okay, can't defend that. He's got us there.
Please don't say it!
Because, Doctor, it's not the family you're born into which matters. It's the one you find along the way. God, it worked! It just died of cringe.
Laters, I'm off to regenerate into Billy Piper for clicks.
Okay, it ended fine. But for that first half, like, Jesus Christ, like, the reaction to this clip has been interesting to see. It's basically divided amongst, like, two groups. The first group are Doctor Who fans who actually watch the show, and they're like, what the fuck is this? Like, what on earth are you doing? And the other half are basically racists who are like, this is so funny. This is so great. You've hit the nail on the head here. So effectively, with this skit, they've basically just made comedy for Nazis. It only seems to appeal to one very specific group, to one very specific demographic, but it's a demographic that don't like the show, not because of the villain dying from cringe and monologues and positivity, but because they don't like black people being in TV. And they're the only ones who have gotten any sort of positive reaction out of this clip. Might the bro have to say woke out loud? Because unironically, they are just trying to make comedy for racists. Like, I think that was kind of the beginning and end of the bit. And John Culshaw trying to do a Ncuti Gatwa impression with added lisp. It's not funny because it keeps telling us what we should be laughing at. But like, Dead Ringers is often very broad with its comedy. But like, John Culshaw, he clearly watches the show. He doesn't have to like it. He doesn't have to, whatever. That's fine. I don't like the current like regime. But it's not because it's supposedly woke. It's like, I don't get who this is for other than we're making comedy to appeal to racists. Yeah, it's so weird. Punching down in the laziest way possible. Yeah, it is lazy. It's going for very low-hanging fruit and also deciding to go even lower while they're at it. Like, current Doctor Who is not above criticism, obviously. It's not above parody or mockery, but I don't know. It just kind of feels like it's sort of missing the forest through the trees just to try and appeal to racists. But yeah, like this as well. Like, Andy... There's only a handful of scenarios here in which Andy's thought process makes any sort of coherent sense here. So Andy is either mentally ill, or Andy has been lied to by someone who is either mentally ill themselves, or is lying to Andy deliberately to make them mentally ill to get, Patreon subscriptions or YouTube AdSense or buying their merch or their supplements or whatever. Those are the options that we're kind of dealing with here. Doctor Who's future is nebulous. Doctor Who's future is up in the air, whatever. But if it does die, if it doesn't go into production, it's not wokeness that killed it. It will actually, ironically, be neoliberal policies. But yeah, the idea that that this era is somehow politically charged more than previous eras. Like, genuinely, I'm trying to, rack my brain over any sort of overt political messaging. Like, of course, you have a Welsh politician in 73 Yards, but they play it so broad, they play it so simplistic that there's basically no commentary to be found there. There is, of course, Dot and Bubble, but that's, no more political than your average Black Mirror episode. But maybe, I don't know, maybe Black Mirror is woke, I don't know. Lucky Day as well. Lucky Day, but that just sort of, fall into the whole conspiracy. There's the Robot Revolution, which, it kind of back ends the political Planet of the Incel stuff for the third act as a bit of a twist. That seems a little bit simplistic. And I guess if you ask somebody what's the most political story of the era, if you ask Andy, it's probably something like The Story in the Engine, but that's because it's got black people in it. It is ultimately a story about colonialism through storytelling. In my opinion, that story is basically the template for the show going forward. Boom with the military industrial complex as well. and the use of AI on the battlefield, but I don't think that's an example that Andy would cite for political Doctor Who. But it would just be, there's a character in a wheelchair, there's a trans character. If that's your idea for what diversity is, then you have got incredible tunnel vision when it comes to media and the human experience. I, cis straight white dude, am technically a diversity hire in the UK because I've got a disability, but also my parents are from state educated schools in working class professions. I'm also atheist, so I'm technically a diversity hire in the UK because we contain multitudes, because diversity is more than just skin colour. Diversity is more than just gender identity, etc, etc. You contain multitudes here, folks. So if your idea of Doctor Who's gone political because it's got a black guy in it, then the problem is firmly you. If only Rusty Davis's script had any sort of fight and passion like his award speeches do. Like I said up top, Star Whovian is mainly known in this fandom for having a very public mental breakdown because he saw women at a convention. He just sees women being included in media as woke and bad and therefore worthy of cancelling the show over. And that's basically the beginning and the end of his ideology, really. With the Chibnall era as well, it's like, oh, it's so woke and progressive and left-leaning and in your face and stuff. But honestly, Chris Chibnall massively pulled his punches when it comes to the political affiliation of the show. Yeah, there was the occasional moments like Orphan 55, but that was the exception, not the rule. Like stories like Revolution of the Daleks, you could have told a really interesting story about the Dalek like police state with the defense drones. But then it's an episode where the Dalek defense drones kill the Prime Minister, who's Theresa May coded live on TV. And it feels like it doesn't really have anything to say politically. But this first clip is absolutely insane. Like I said, you've got somebody with a pretty explicit, like, either mental illness or has been lied to by somebody with a mental illness. And then the presenters are just like, yeah, I can see where he's coming from. Like, Jesus Christ. It's like when you watch a Bolstrek video and he's actively going through, like, frame by frame, looking at the background extras, looking at the supporting artists and figuring out who's white and who isn't. Like, this is an explicit mental illness, man. The fact that you can't even watch a blue box sci-fi show without combing through the background extras to know if they meet your personally mandated quota for how many white people should be on screen. Like, yeah, it's mental illness, man. The problem isn't wokeness, it's the opposite. It's performativeness over thoughtful messaging or storytelling. The right pick up on the performativeness because that's all they're capable of. Oh yeah, it's because, ironically, the political aspects of this current era, and Chibnall to a lesser extent, but definitely under Russell in this current tenure, are so shallow that because it's so shallow, because it's so simplistic, now they're picking up on it. Because of what's been happening in Iran and Israel over the past couple of days, I've been seeing a load of clips on my social media feed of Tony Blair in the early 2000s giving speeches about WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, in the Middle East. And he says, oh, these devices are capable of being deployed in 45 minutes. And then I remembered in World War III, which Russell T Davies wrote in the early 2000s, for Series 1 with the Ninth Doctor. How long did the Slovenes say that the massive weapons of destruction, how quickly they could be deployed? 45 seconds. Very deliberate political allegory here. There's nothing even approaching that level of explicit political commentary in this current era of Doctor Who. But in 2005, that was okay, that was fine, because ironically in the past 10 years, we didn't have some sort of politically mandated mental illness. It's like when the CBeebies announcement was made for the potential spin-off, and you just have people in the comment section being like, oh, indoctrinate the kids young, get them while they're young. It's like, oh yeah, God forbid kids learn lessons like sharing is caring, or, you know, be nice to your neighbour, don't talk to strangers. And it's so funny when they're like, oh, you gotta protect them kids, you gotta protect the kids, when they're supporting Donald Trump, who, now that Jeffrey Epstein is dead, is basically the most prolific and famous alleged paedophile on the planet. That's the contradiction. Because they support Trump, who is the world's most famous alleged paedophile on the planet, then it means that they have to sort of go for, like, oh, we have to be super performative now in our defense of the kids, because that's the only way to square the circle. That's the only way that we can defend Trump while still claiming to want to defend kids and young people. Like, Matt Walsh is one of the most visible people outspoken against trans people and LGBTQ plus people more broadly, and he's like on camera early in his career talking about how much he wants to breed with 15-year-old girls. Like, these two positions, the only way they can make it mentally work in their brain is to have this performative almost like double thing. And that's why Lucky Day, believe it or not, was actually a pretty interesting analysis on podcast grifters who know that they're lying and they know that they're doing it. Someone in my comment section the other day was like, oh, all of the villains in the R2D2 era are just straight white males. The Star Beast, the Meep is voiced by Miriam Margolyes, a queer woman. Okay, great start. Wild Blue Yonder, okay, the Not Things, played by David Tennant and Catherine Tate. So you got David Tennant there, straight white villain. Okay, we'll have that one. The Giggle, Neil Patrick Harris, queer American. Next, Churchill Ruby Road, Goblins. They're really coming for us straight dudes, aren't they? Space Babies, The Bogeyman. Devil's Cord, non-binary drag queen. Boom, an ambulance. 73 yards. Okay, we actually have a presumed straight white male with Roger Ap Gwilliam. Okay, there we go. Dot and Bubble. They finally got us. They finally got us, folks. But the villain is a woman, so it's not straight white male. So half a point. Okay. Rogue. We've got the Chulda, who are mixed genders, but the main one is a non-white woman because she's played by Indira Varma. Legend of Ruby Sunday. We have Susan Twist. And we also have Sutek, who is a dog. Or Mrs. Flood as well, who's an old white woman. And Archie Panjabi, who's a non-white woman. Okay, great. We're doing great here. Joy to the World, once again, military-industrial complex. The villain is a star. Great. Robot Revolution, Robots, and Al. We've got Lux here as well, voiced by a queer man, Alan Cumming. The Well, a Shadow, great. Lucky Day. Okay, 4. We have 4 so far. Story in the Engine, The Barber, who's a black Nigerian man. Okay. Interstellar Song Contest. Palestinian coded, but a presumably straight white dude. Okay, that's 5. Wish World, Conrad recycled from Lucky Day, and Omega, who's a skeleton. In all of these episodes, including the specials from the Christmas specials and the 2023 specials, if you count the Citizens of Fime Time as one entity, we have 5. Okay, if you want to count Gabriel Wolf because of the voice actor, because we did count the voice actors for Lux and for the Star Beast. Okay, so we can even be generous and move it up to 6. Okay, there we go. The fact that the show is so diverse now in front of the camera ironically means that the straight white male villains are actually in the minority in terms of the villains, especially when you count the proliferation in the marketing and how much status they're given in the series of, Anita Dobson and Archie Panjabi. What about 13's era? Same deal. I've had this conversation before. Same deal. Like I said, similar to the Bad Wolf era, because the cast are so diverse across the board in front of the camera, it does mean that you end up having more diverse people as the villains. That's just like a sort of natural consequence. Like the Master is played by a non-white actor. You can ascribe a lot of issues with the current era of Doctor Who, and I have done, and I will continue to do so, but we do need to continue pushing back on this narrative that it was woke or progressive leftist identity politics or whatever that is the downfall of the show. I think it's only being talked about more now because it's easy to, not watch the show, or maybe just catch a couple of clips here and there and then complain about it and not actually have to engage with the meat of the text, not actually have to engage with the actual stories being told, because that would require a slight time investment, and you can't have that because it's social media. But because the diversity on screen is just diversity on screen, that ends up becoming the linchpin, this anti-woke thinking.